So in this video, we're actually going to be comparing the GMAT to the GRE. Now, for those of you who don't know, both of these tests are actually admissions tests, typically geared towards graduate studies. Now, the distinction here is that the GMAT typically targets students who intend on pursuing business on the postgraduate level. And so people who are looking for to pursue an MBA or a specialized master's, maybe in finance or marketing, maybe a PhD in management or in some type of business, will typically be required to write the GMAT. Now, the GRE is a little bit more general and it applies to a lot of programs that are not as business focused. So, maybe a Master of History or Political Science or some engineering programs will require it as well. And so, the key here is to really determine what your background is and what type of degree you want to pursue on a postgraduate level. Now, if you have the intention of pursuing an MBA, what you'll notice is that recently a lot of schools will allow you to apply with both, or one or the other, in other words. So either the GMAT or the GRE. I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that they're looking to attract a very diverse student body and maybe some people who'd be very compelling applicants to the program, but just wouldn't apply because they just haven't taken the right standardized test. And so if you have the intention of pursuing an MBA or a specialized master's in business, and you know this and you haven't written either yet, I would actually encourage you to pursue the MBA. The reason for this is that if you intend on targeting a high profile school or program, an Ivy League type of school or something ranked similar to that, anything essentially in the top 100. Maybe you have aspirations of going into consulting or investment banking. What you'll find is that on the applications for a lot of these companies, they will specify that you disclose your GMAT score. Now, why do they do this? One of the reasons is that it's a great way for you to assess where the candidate stands relative to the rest of the class. And so, certainly, they could look at undergraduate GPAs, although at the MBA level, for some people, it's been quite a number of years since they've been in an undergraduate program. So, the GMAT's the most recent indication of what their aptitude is like. But the other thing too is it's very hard to compare somebody who came from an Ivy League undergraduate program versus somebody who maybe is coming from an international school. They might not necessarily know how rigorous it is comparatively. Two completely different subject areas, so a 3.5 in engineering might not be equivalent to a 3.5 in a liberal arts field, but then you take into account the rank of the school and how rigorous those programs are known to be. It's just very convoluted to actually compare the two candidates on that basis. But if they have a GMAT score and the GMAT itself is structured so it's going to be very similar for both candidates who are writing it, they kind of have an idea of where that candidate actually stands in terms of, their aptitude relative to the rest of the class. And so this is one of the reasons why. But another reason is some of the top ranking programs actually have something called grade non-disclosure. And what that is it essentially states that employers aren't supposed to ask you what your MBA marks are like. And only certain schools have this, and you'll know if your specific school does have this. In fact, you can probably contact them before or ask this part of the interview process. And you can do a lot of research online. This isn't something that is a secret by any means. It's something that a lot of schools will be very open about. But one of the reasons for this is it's actually intended to be a very good thing. And so what you'll find is that, of course, GMAT is a very important thing in the recruitment process. And so if you have people who are pursuing the MBA program, they want to learn a bunch of different things. They're paying a lot of money, spending a lot of time, and really spending key years of their young professional life learning a bunch of new skills. What you don't want is you don't want people tailoring their coursework to the GPA that they need for the company that they're looking to target. And so what I mean by that is if somebody has a background in marketing and they're looking to go to supply chain management, for example, they might be more compelled to take marketing courses at the graduate level to inflate their GPA if they're looking to get into a firm that really does look at GPA, as opposed to pursuing a lot of the supply chain courses that's going to be completely new to them, that they're really actually interested in. And so, in order to protect their GPA, they might be taking courses that they might not actually want to pursue. They might also be deterred from taking courses that they feel like they wouldn't perform very well in. And so a lot of times this will happen to a lot of the quantitative courses, particularly for people who don't have quant-based backgrounds. They feel as though they've been out of college for too long. When they were in college, they just didn't have the right quantitative background to be competitive in that course anyways, and that now they're at the graduate level. The worst thing that could happen is that they graduate with a bunch of debt and not able to find a job because they took a lot of the harder courses and they just didn't perform very well. And so the grade non-disclosure essentially says, you know, take the courses that is going to challenge you the most and that's going to um, appeal um, to your desires to learn new information. And so you're not limited by a specific number that you need to meet for recruitment purposes. However, this is makes it a little bit more difficult for a lot of recruiters. Now you've got 50, 60, 70, for example, candidates applying, and you're looking at it like, okay, well, there's a couple people here who have very similar backgrounds. How do we know like where these people fall relative to their class? Well, the GMAT score is one very important factor of that. So for that specific reason, it's not necessarily, it doesn't say that you can't apply with a GRE, but if, again, it's going to create even more hurdles where now you're like, okay, well, this person took the GRE versus somebody who took the GMAT. What here, like, what do we consider? How do we convert this? Is it an apples to apples comparison? Just creates a little bit of an extra barrier. And so for that reason, the GMAT might be a little bit easier also. Now, there's some speculation. Don't know how true this is. Maybe you can leave it in the comment section below. There's some speculation that if you're applying to certain schools with a low standardized test score, it's better for that score to come from a GRE than a GMAT because there's some speculations that schools might not necessarily have to report the GRE scores if they're um, get a certain amount of applicants who are applying with the GRE, but they have to report all GMAT scores. This could be completely mythical. This could have no relevance at all, and this could be absolutely false. So I wouldn't put any stock into that idea at all. If you see a lot of it online, maybe it's true. If it is, like I said, correct me in the comment section below. I think you should take whichever test you feel is going to open the most doors for you. If you're not set on going to business school and you want to open yourself up to a more specialized degree that requires you to apply with a GRE and doesn't look at the GMAT scores, even if you have one, then that might be the best option for you. Otherwise, if you're set on the MBA, I would take the GMAT score. I would study very hard. There's a lot of different resources online. I'm not going to go into the specific breakdown and what you need to know in terms of knowledge, how many hours you should study, that type of thing. I think there's a ton of awesome resources online that'll go into that. I'm more so looking at it from a strategy perspective in that you're coming right out of undergrad or maybe you have a couple years of work experience and you're not where you thought you were going to be in your career and you're looking for other options, and now you're looking at these standardized tests as being the final barrier before you can apply to some of these master's programs. And so hopefully this is providing you with a little bit of clarification on which one you should zero in on as well. In conclusion, I would say that if you're unsure of what you actually want to do in terms of going to a specific grad school, what I would do is I would make a list of schools that you're specifically targeting, industries that you're specifically targeting as well, and do as much research as you possibly can. Find out how competitive these industries are, what their application process looks like. I would get in touch with some of their recruiters at the MBA level to see specifically what areas they look for. Maybe they're just looking for a very high GPA at the master's degree level, or maybe they're looking for college involvement at the MBA level. Maybe they're looking for a specific GMAT score, or maybe they're looking for prior work experience as being the most important part of the application process. So I would focus on the specific companies that you're targeting, which schools happen to place the most people in these companies, and I would look at the strength of specific programs you're comparing. For example, for the sake of comparison, you might be an engineer and you might be looking to get a leadership position and to still stay within engineering. And an MBA might have been the traditional route that a lot of people went down, but you might have discovered now, especially there's some really specialized masters, like a master's of engineering management. You might find that that program will give you a lot more benefits and give you the pedigree that you're looking for specifically for what you're targeting and for the industry that you're targeting as well too. That specific program might not necessarily require a GMAT. It might actually request a GRE score. And so it's very important to look at the schools that you're targeting and to also see the range of the GMAT and the GRE scores to see where you fall relative to the rest of the class also. Because ultimately, the prior classes are going to give you an idea of what the range is probably going to look like if you were to enter that class. That's very important also because when you're competing for jobs with a lot of the other people in your class, you want to make sure that you have a compelling profile as well. Another thing is to also consider that when you're in a program, you're not only competing with people that are also in your program, but you're really competing with the job market. You're competing with people coming out of other schools and other programs as well. And so don't necessarily, apply to a school that you happen to be at the top of the class of because sure, schools might be or companies might be interviewing a bunch of people at your school, but they're probably also interviewing a bunch of people in other schools as well too. So these are just things to keep in mind. Overall, if you're looking for which one should I take, which one's better, there is no right or wrong answer. A lot of it depends on what programs you're targeting, what's the requirements of the programs, and again, what industries and what companies specifically are going to look at when you're actually applying after your MBA or your master's program. So that's going to conclude this video. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comment section below. If you have any experience with either of these two admissions tests, please leave it in the comment section below as well. Thank you again so much for watching, and until next time, we'll see you soon.